what we got now is 4 Super Pro dragsters doing well. We're on our best season ever. Ashley's leading the points. We're all in the top 10. We got a couple races left this summer, so I'm really excited about the future.
Hello and welcome back to the Bracket Life broadcast. I'm Brandon, back with Andrew and Travis, as you can see. So Travis, lovely to have you back again.
Thanks for having me.
And Andrew, obviously, excellent to see you again this week.
You too, bud.
For it. As everybody could see, the opening video, a little bit different this week. That was Ogilvy's Auto and Fleet Service, the little, commercial we had done up. I guess that was 2 years ago now. So that is who is presenting tonight's show, helping us out. Got a caption coming up. So as everybody kind of heard a few weeks ago, right? We talked about Ogilvy's Auto and Fleet. We were bringing back the FTI performance stuff. Mike and Vicky, who are, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, bringing everything back, getting it going. So they are, for us, the place to go for different parts in Canada. Transmissions like FTI stuff, K&R Performance Engineering, Jones Transmission Pumps, everything under the sun, anything that, a Motor State distributor can get you, we can get you. If you're interested in any prices, availability, whatever, shoot me a message or on your screen, Ogilvy's Auto and Fleet Service, social media at Ogilvy's Auto or ogilvysauto.com. That would be excellent. Now that we got through it, we'll jump in. I just came up with this name, actually. Well, Rachel sent it to me. I haven't run it by you guys yet. The Canadian Countdown, I think, would be a great name to call this, at least for tonight.
I like that. The Canadian Countdown, the recap on everything. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, go over some Canadian news, whether it's breaking news, stuff that went on, events, races that have happened. So we'll jump into that, I guess. Whoever.
So I guess I know you were going to talk about Paolo down at Sweet 16, right? Running Radio versus the World.
Yes, sir.
So I missed that race. I'll be honest with you. I was watching something else. What ended up happening here? Did you follow much of that?
I didn't get to watch it. I followed it on Facebook because everybody from around here, Paulo being near us, coming from Luskville, we were all paying attention to it. He was flying. It was like 3:55 was some of the quickest laps that he made. And he started with, I want to say he started at a 62 and then went to a 58, then hit a 55.
He was making some good laps then.
Absolutely. And consistent. He was right there until I'm not sure what happened. Whole lot of smoke and slowed down a bunch. So unfortunately in the final round, something was unhappy. But, great showing for, Apollo representing Canada in Black Betty.
Absolutely. And that's a big, you get any of those duck races, right? The radio races, I kind of loosely follow those. That class is it's wicked fast. It's not as deep as it used to in that you get 40 or 50 cars, but the top 20 are still there and they're still wicked quick. And to get as far as he did is, that's real good. I guess to continue on to that, 2 weeks ago, the NMCA, right? They had their opener at Bradenton. All I've watched all winter is Bradenton. I never realized that was the winter track for the world because every race I feel like I've watched since December is in Bradenton. But Smokey's Garage, Scotty Wildgust rolled down with their Pro Mod. Actually, the whole team had 5 cars there. They had a Camaro that Scotty just bought, Mike Clark's Hellcat, the top sportsman car, which was Scotty's Pro Mod last year, then the Pro Mod now, which I think is like a PDRA style Pro Mod that NMCA that they can run too. They ended up going to the final and winning, and Scotty drove the wheels off that car. He left the last 3 rounds. I think were all whole shot wins, right? Number one qualifier, I think was round 2, and just nailed the tree. All the W's were bracket racing wins. There was 001 or 003 MOV, right? Just crazy. So that was a big win for those guys, right? They were behind the ball a little bit on qualifying, had some issues getting it down, got it figured out, and big win for them. I believe they're geared up to go to some PDRA races coming up here shortly, because the reason they took the whole fleet down there was to get it ready to go down to other events. So it was fun to watch them, right?
Yeah, got to start working the bugs out, right?
Yeah, so it was, we need to follow them, because they were behind a little bit from the top qualifiers, but they weren't off enough that, like, I think some more testing, get those guys right into the mix of things, so it should be fun to watch them.
Because they were really high up. Like, were they 16? Can't remember. They were teetering on the edge, but then they have been fast before. They have been much faster than what they, showed there. But
the Snowbirds, I think the one in December, they were in the top. I'm sure they were in the top 5 in qualifying at that race. And I think this one, they were behind a little bit more. Like, they didn't do as good in qualifying, but that's quite 7th. So yeah, like, this qualifying wasn't as strong in this race, but they certainly figured it out come eliminations, right? So it does. I mean, big kudos, because they got the car to hang with the crowd, and Scotty drove the wheels off it to get the W. So that was fun to watch.
You guys have some experience.
Yeah. A couple things coming up, I guess, worth mentioning, right? Because that was part of the Canadian Countdown, was the Motorama Drag Racing Night of Champions. And if you're a champion in Ontario, Quebec, even Alberta, if you want to fly out here, sign up. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you're Canadian and you won a points championship in 2020 or 2021, the guys who organized the Motorama Custom Car and Motorsports Expo, they do a presentation on the Saturday night, which I believe that would be April 30th, because the show is 29, 30, May 1st. It's an award show for any Canadian participants who've won a points program. So the deadline is March 31st, is what I was told to lay down. But the show is open to everyone, obviously, in the Toronto area or Canada, if you've got nothing to do and want to fly in at the end of April to check out the GTA and the show. But it's coming up. Should be fun. Looking forward to it. It's been 2 years, 3 years. When was the pandemic? I'm trying to think. The show basically ended the weekend that the world shut down. I felt so bad for the guys. That was the same weekend. But first time in a couple of years they've had it. It should be a lot of fun. So I'm hoping everyone can make it out who's in the area, and it should be a great time. Travis,
we will be there.
That's it. Yes, and that's right. The Bracket Life booth will be there as well, right?
Yes, this will be our first time bringing a booth. We, as it's been tougher that we've spoke about before with racetracks, some places are already running, so it's kind of hard for everybody to be there that normally would be, since the dates were moved back. But yes, we will be there with all our Bracket Life gear, all the apparel, everything we've got in stock, or at least most of it, set up, ready to meet everybody and have time to really relax and have good conversation during it. When you're at the racetrack meeting people, it's kind of hard to make good connections because you're focused on some other things. But this will be a great opportunity. I'm really excited for it, and to be a part of the Night of Champions stuff.
That's right.
So Travis, you were on. We spoke about this 2 weeks ago. You have been, kind of all over, cruising around, racing. You're the first one of the 3 of us to get out in a race car. I know it was a little bumpy for you, but let's talk about that.
Yeah, first one to break a car this year too. We made a trek down to Tucson, which basically is an hour from the Mexico border, right? So we're talking, going pretty far south, and it was a bit of a hectic drive down. We traveled with some friends of ours, Jason Pad and stuff like that. And Stan S3 and some other guys. And it was everywhere we could have hit snow. On a mountain pass, we hit snow. And heater quit working in the furnace quit working in the motorhome. So we had space heaters and the generator going. And it was a little bit of an adventure, but we got down there and it was actually good. There was, I want to say like 10 or 12 of us Canadians down there, and don't quote me on that, but everybody always, we all went some rounds per se, but actually kind of the best ones were probably Pat and his little love truck there, and then my dad was fortunate enough to make a couple splits on Saturday down to Tucson, and it was just a really good event. It was our first time being to it. Chris Forsyth is the guy that puts it on. He's out of California, and he's always helped me a lot with promoting. Reached out to him because we planned to go down, no different than anybody. We were planning 2 years ago to be down there, and it was kind of the week of the world shutting down. We were getting ready to leave. I guess that's 3 years ago now, in 2019. We were entered in the shootouts and ready to go, and didn't pan out. So we kind of had a connection, but never really met the guy. And he's always kind of, been an ear to lend as far as promoting stuff goes, and has kind of, given me some advice. So it was really good to get down there. It was pretty good.
Absolutely. I've been on one of those trips when we were going to Bowling Green, where the furnace did not work in March. The start of it was rough. Sleeping with your long johns on and 2 pairs of pants and everything like that, trying to make it through the night. But yeah, good story now, right?
I don't think I've ever had a breakdown on a trip for cold. I've left for Indy. We did when I was younger for a divisional, and we were in the parking lot. It was snowing. I like, do we want to do this or not? But that was prior to motorhomes, like the old F-350 days. But yeah, I can't imagine having the heater source and losing it. That's got to make a trip just that much more fun, right?
It's always
it was good. Fun. It was good that it was just the boys, right? It was the boys, and we toughed her out. And, it doesn't matter how many layers of blankets you got, you still wake up and your head's cold, right? And I think there was one point my dad said, I was like, my head's still getting cold, and he said, well, here's a toque. It's very Canadian. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So pretty much, other than, or I guess. Not quite on the other side of the country, I guess, but in Piedmont, right? We had some representation there.
Yep.
With old Top Gun.
Yeah, Dave Gunn. We were so Michael Beard's race. This is a new race because this is a second door car race he's putting on now, right? Because there's the one in the fall. This was the spring door car race for him at Piedmont. So we were actively watching to see who made it, and to my best of my knowledge, the only lone Canadian that made it down there was Dave Gunn and his Coronet. Dave went rounds. I think he took each day. I think he took. He was double entered the same car, and I think he was round 3 and round 4 every day with both entries. But just fortunately, didn't have the luck go his way to go any further than that. But still a good showing. Randomly, turns out he ends up meeting a guy that I know from the U.S. who they don't know each other. One day, and they're both talking. They end up talking about knowing me, just random small world type stuff, right? But it was kind of neat to hear my buddy talking about Dave and seeing love this car type of thing, right? And thinking this guy's from Tennessee. How would he possibly run into this dude? But so Dave was the lone representative Canadian that I was aware of racing on the East Coast last weekend. There might have been some others, but that's the only one I know of. But he did well, so good representation.
Well, good for Dave. Good for Dave for getting out there, going racing. If I could be gone, I would be gone. But here we are. So that's all good. Good for I think that was a good first Canadian countdown. I feel good about it.
It helps when you've got some Canadians heading south and racing and doing well on top of it, right? So it makes it easier to report on things that are there to report. So
absolutely, and there's a lot of racing coming up. It's closer to Travis in Vegas, right? The national events this weekend, then the divisional, then the Spring Fling Million. So I imagine we'll have some Canadian representation down there. We'll keep an eye on that, and then whatever kind of comes up, then that'll be what we get to talk about. So I'm excited. That just means we're getting closer.
One more week closer.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So we'll kind of jump into the topic now. So it's for junior drag racing, something interesting conversation, especially with the three of us. That's why I wanted to make sure that Travis was on for it, because it's 3 different kind of not walks of life, but walks of getting into a big car, into super pro, semi-pro, whatever it is. Obviously, I started running junior when I was 6. Started a little earlier than most kids at that time. That was the whole, being 8 for 3 years kind of situation. every year you'd show up, and every year your birthday you were the same age. We did that. Andrew, you ran a junior for a few years as well. Didn't age out of it. You said more.
Yeah, I was lucky. So I was able to start in around when I was 8 or 9. We bought a Jigster, right? When Jigs offered a turnkey junior dragster with a 5 horsepower Briggs and Stratton motor with the choke and a pull start. If you broke it, you could put it one off the lawnmower in because it was the same motor style junior dragster. I was lucky I ran that for a few years before I outgrew it. We built a second junior. Dad built one in-house. At that point, the Raptor motors was all the rage. Any junior dads out there or guys around my age might recognize that name. That was the big revolution in junior motors. We ran it on 112. Methanol wasn't a thing yet. We were starting that car for the first time in the shop, and I actually had a motor that had 112 in it, so I made the same, race gas smell when it was running like the big car did that was right beside it. And I actually grew that car by I was 14, I think. So the gap between 14 and I guess I got in the big car at 21 was when we got our first full-size car. I got my first full-size car. But I had a terrible junior career. I was an awful racer. I won the long haul award. I think was the biggest thing I really won. 2 other junior races, which I think was just a participation trophy. Upon hindsight, later years, because I'm sure someone drove farther than me to get there, but everyone else seemed to win something except me. But it was an enjoyable experience because I learned a lot. Like I feel like I got to that point where I got into a car and instead of having to wait till 16, I was able to do it as a kid. I was lucky to be able to. My dad, my parents were very giving enough that I think they saw the writing on the wall that it's either we do it now or we do it later. There's a comment from a possible family member who outlines who was the better junior drag racer. My brother does have a much larger wall of trophies than I do in the juniors, but it was a path to the big car for me. Like it was, I think, an inevitability for me. Like it was one of those things where I was so into racing because our family was so into racing. I was lucky to be able to start the junior and learned a lot about losing, a lot about how to not win before I was able to get into a big car and learn some of those lessons again, just on a much steeper learning curve that didn't last as long. So that's more or less my junior experience and how I got through that. That's, I think, the best way to put it.
Absolutely. So then, now the third kind of option that you have there, right? Travis, you never drove a junior. Have you ever been, like, at least sat in one?
Never been in one. Never drove one. Started one a couple times to help some kids out, but no, we kind of got into it when I was at an age. I think it was about 13, 14 when we really got into bracket racing. And my dad and I had a conversation because I had quads and sleds and stuff like that. Was lucky enough we did a lot of that stuff before we decided to go racing. And the conversation was kind of had like, spend all that money, to have something that was going to go slower than some of those other, machines that I had ridden for a short period of time didn't make a whole lot of sense, right? So for me, my first introduction really to juniors, like I had friends that did it back then and stuff like that, but I was always kind of more focused on helping dad with dialing in his delay box and, dialing in the car and learning how things worked and, really just became a student of the sport, especially on the top bulb side of things, and figuring out how it all worked, knowing that in a couple of years I was going to be in them. So I was focused on that when I was younger. But for me, my first introduction kind of came when I think you guys saw the post last week about this mentorship program that started, I want to say it was about 3 years ago ish. So local junior club, we've got a good strong junior count, especially at Rad Torque Raceway in Edmonton. So one of the parents came together with the Top Eliminator group, which is kind of a series that we've run for the last 10 years for sure. And basically picked some drivers and picked some kids and paired them up and did like mentor mentee type thing. And, I haven't done a lot with it as far as like, helping out with the car and stuff like that, but got to know, the ins and outs of the junior program and, trying to help the kids out and and just like a lot of people that we race with have. So we've kind of linked it up now, and that's how I got really involved with it over the last little while.
That's cool. I was checking out that program, and we talked about it a little bit before. It's really interesting because, you know, whether people really get involved in the junior stuff, right, is sometimes tough, but it is a great program or idea to teach kids about, you know, the next step, because that's what we want to talk about tonight, was the transition differences that we all felt, right? Kind of not quite 100% opposite Andrew, but I had a much more successful junior career myself. And then, you know, won however many races. I won championships for 5 or 6 years at Shannonville. Everywhere we went, we were successful and competitive. And then my transition into Super Pro, because right when I was 16, we got into a Super Pro dragster, and then had paid attention enough, maybe not to the same degree as Travis that you just said, because I was focused on doing my thing versus where, you know, you were 100% focused on what your dad was doing and learning all of that. So, but for driving the race car and the concept of what you're supposed to do on the racetrack was very smooth for me. And I did not find any, you know, there's a bit of downtime that you have to get used to the speed because it picks up so much and everything like that. But to find success out of juniors into Super Pro was fairly quick for me. So kind of for you two, what's the transition like, Andrew, for yourself getting into it? And then we'll talk to Travis. So just, you know, jump in and kind of cold turkey.
So I have to admit, I had a similar-ish transition to Travis when it comes to respect to working on the cars, because I didn't age out of junior and get into a big car. I spent time between junior before getting my own car. So, you know, we did a lot of super gas style racing, and really actually we only bracket raced as testing to go divisional racing. So off weekends we'd take the car and go, you know, 990 Super Pro racing with it. So, you know, gas, chargers, cooling, like all the things. So when I got into big cars, I had an idea of, you know, what the track was like, what to do, right? The concept, the general concept of being on a race surface, right? I had a lot of experience on how to, you know, operate the car, start the car, move the car. Like, it was a bit of a middle ground. The confidence level really wasn't there because, in all honesty, I wasn't as good a racer as a junior. I was motivated to be good. I was done getting my butt kicked in what I felt was maybe not as good of equipment, or whatever the reason was I was using, but flat out, you know, there was a determination. And that might have been the biggest takeaway as a junior was I knew I wasn't that good and that competitive, but we had a super gas car that was very competitive. You know, for the limited amount that we ran, I was highly motivated to get in. So when I got into my first Mustang, which was essentially an 1160, you know, big block Chevy powered Mustang, Ford fans just all died a little bit, right? It took a while to get used to, you know, leaving off a button on the bottom bulb. I mean, when we were geared up to run pro tree racing, we had a practice tree, and Ian and I would just kill that every day on a pro tree, though. You know, the irony is when we got into big car racing from juniors, even when I was in a junior, I didn't want to bracket race. I had no interest in bracket racing. Our bracket racing was junior drag racing at divisional races, Saturday night or Friday night, when they would run junior programs as part of the Division 3 programs. All I wanted to do was get into heads up super gas racing, right? Or super street when we bought my Mustang, because, you know, that was a thing too. So bracket racing, the transition was actually a slow burn interest to me. But once I got to figure out the bottom bulb off a button, once I got to figuring out just how to dial a carbureted car, and to be honest, a few things that were new to both of us, Dad and me, because he bracket raced many years ago in a different era to an extent, right? From what the modern era was. And then we went super gas racing, which was totally different from the bracket setup. We had to learn a lot together. But once we got comfortable with it, we got good. And all of a sudden it's like, this is fun. Like, this is not 7 hours to a track. So the junior stuff really was funny to me because I really just learned the sport in and out, but there wasn't as much on track transition to the driver's seat. It was, you know, I knew where the turnoff was at St. Thomas. I knew where the turnoff was at Grand Bend. I knew where the turnoff was at Cayuga after they changed the track. But it it held a little less, I think, in the overall confidence of moving into the big car. That had to be learned when I got into the car. Oh,
Sorry, I was having a computer, the little pop-up kept going up. And then
I was worried for a second there. We were going to lose you. I'm like, did I just become the host? I'm like, I'm not ready
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure it'll happen, right? All the live show stuff, I'm sure it'll go down. So Travis, for you, so how was it just jumping into something and going down the racetrack? Now I know, like you said, moving around, started, drive, whatever you need to do. Right? We all know that being in the race car when it launches, it's a lot different, feeling. So how was it? What was the time period for you getting into it? When were you comfortable? And then when did you start to find success?
So I'm an August birthday, so basically I got my license. I think it was like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, like my driver's license, and that weekend I was racing, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of all had it set up, and I was like very fortunate, right? We had bought another car, and this was set up for me, and we had, at that time we had a couple trailers burning down the highway, and I'll never forget the first time I let go, right? Like I lifted and then got back on it, kind of like, hey, you gotta be ready for this, right? And that was a 1250 car, quarter mile. It was an old 81 Camaro, and it was heavy and just had a small block in it. And like, I'd never felt power like that in my life, right? So I don't know if I want to race my first year. I think I ended up either in a semi or a final. And that was kind of, a good way to end the year. And then the following season, we were doing local bracket race stuff at the time. And I actually ended up winning my first championship the following year. And it was, it was a hometown bracket setup. So I'm not trying to take anything away from that group of guys, but like it was, it was Northern Alberta, and like it was, there was about 4 or 5 guys that you really had to worry about. And the rest of them were there, just enjoying themselves and having fun. So had quite a bit of success early with that. And then we kind of stepped it up, similar to Andrew. My dad had always wanted to go NHRA Division 6, chasing the division. And he ended up buying a dragster. I kind of moved into a bigger car of ours and started doing it. I think it was a few years later. I chased the brackets for a little while, for a few years. And my dad was working a lot, so he kind of just like allowed me to go and do some of that. And I had some success bracket racing. And then we transitioned into the superclass stuff as well. So my dad in his dragster racing super comp, and me in that 86 Camaro that we had doing super street. And for me, it was kind of like, that's where I found a home for, I don't know, better part of, 6, 7, 8 years. That's all we wanted to do, very similar to Andrew and his family. We enjoyed it, and it was a whole new learning curve, and it was a whole new challenge. And, we took to it fairly quickly, and not myself personally, as far as the dialing of the cars go. My dad kind of maintained the equipment at that point in time, and told me where I needed to be on the number. And where I wanted to set up, whether it was, 4 fast, 2 fast, whatever. But that whole dynamic, we had a lot of success with it. I won a division championship, and, we showed up everywhere we went, and we would transfer that car over into super gas sometimes. And the tree was a bit of a struggle, but we would kind of, show up, and, we made some semifinals and always had a good showing in super gas. So we were kind of dialed in on that end of things too. Right. So when I came back to go bracket racing, when we took that other turn, we won the division championships, went to Memphis and IHRA and did everything we did, traveled a lot and had a lot of fun doing it. But we made the decision that, we wanted to go back to the big money stuff. There was a lot of money at home on the top bulb side of things, and that's what we wanted to focus our energy on. And not to take anything away from it, but we were just kind of done that chapter, right? And we wanted to move on to the big money stuff, which is as we see now is a fairly big thing, right? So that transition was a little bit harder. I always did pretty well, and I'd win usually 1 race a year. But yeah, it was tough to go from letting go on a pro tree, for almost 5 years, like nothing but a pro tree. And I remember one year I put like 400 laps on when we did well everywhere we went, to letting go on the top bulb. I had a little bit of an adjustment, right? So, I kind of struggled there, but I do agree with what you said, Andrew. One thing I've noticed about some people coming out of juniors is they know where the beams are, they know where the starting line is, they know where to turn off of the track. But I think a lot of these kids these days, and I'm not knocking any parents or anything like that, but I stepped up from, I had a 1250 car, I had an 1150 car, then a 1050 car. Then I jumped in and did some driving for some friends that had some 8-second cars. I gradually worked my way up to having a 7-second dragster or a 4-second in the 8th mile dragster, right? A bunch of these kids that I've seen jump up in recent years, they're having a really tough time adjusting going 160 mile an hour at the stripe if they're jumping in something that fast or whatever. That's the one thing that I've noticed about not all kids, but quite a few of them that have stepped up and graduated to the big cars. When they're jumping a dragster, with a big block that's got upwards of 1,000 horsepower, they're having a little bit of trouble adjusting to driving the finish line. And these are kids that I've watched. They know what to do at the finish line. They know how to drive that into the racetrack, but they don't realize that rate of closure.
Well, and that's something you touched on there too that I've watched on this, and we talked about this off the air, Touch Brandon and I, that the level of sophistication that you see junior drivers come out at, like a lot of the things we're talking about is rate of closure and feet per second issues, right? So when you're going 85 mile an hour in a junior, and then you're going 175 in a dragster, right? The general principles of everything that's going on are the same. Like you watch juniors now carrying 3-4 numbers. Like there's execution strategy. When I raced, the strategy was to be within 1/10 of your dial in and try to be better than like a 600 on the tree, right? Now you're watching junior parents and kids set up and like you listen to them in the lanes, or if you're called and you're beside them, and they're talking about adding or taking 5 pounds out to carry a few numbers, like stuff that I don't say didn't exist when I raced junior, but like was not really plausible. So I'm watching kids jumping into big cars, pulling off strategical stuff that, I'll be honest, was not even something I was doing in big cars until like relatively all that long ago, right? Like, what do you mean you want to carry 6 numbers? Like these are things that from the transition I've noticed makes that easier for them maybe. And I'm speaking out of place maybe slightly because I'm imposing my thoughts on what it is, but I'll be frank, I'm watching some guys and girls jump into cars that once they get past the speed, right? That differential of 1/8 or quarter mile racing, are insanely good quick. And there's a laundry list of examples out in our part of the world, particular, to be honest with you. But I mean, one that jumps out at me that I think, like Sarah Zonta, who's a racer who won like a quick sportsman, which was like a quick 16 style class out of the Race Cayuga series. They were a family that, to my best of my knowledge, weren't in racing at all. They got in as a family to an extent in junior level. And transitioned right out through juniors and decided like they didn't want to get out of racing. So they went and bought a dragster. And Sarah wheels a dragster. There's a younger sister, Madison, I think might still be in junior. So I'm not quite sure what the plan is there. But they saw that, I don't know where I intended to speak to them before the show just to get a little info, but they intended they got into racing. I'm not sure how. But Sarah's transitioned very well. Like, a lot of what they do, the strategies and what they're looking at doing, the way they built their car, even their dragster. I mean, they built a fast dragster because in junior racing, they enjoyed being chaser, like everyone does. The race is in front of you, but they had a strategy when they got into that car and what they kind of wanted to do. And it took a few years to get it figured out. And it was one of those things where I'm like, that corner got cut fast. Like it took me years before I was able to win a championship or even be considered, honestly, good enough in my own head that I could compete. And here's, one example of someone who came out of juniors and was amazing. I've seen Dean Schwimmler on here, his son Luke. I mean, Luke won a world championship in junior drag racing. He's transitioned to a big car, and he has been very good at it. And Dean's a great racer too, right? So it's not like he had a bad teacher to help him along. But like this kid's been very good in a quick car as well, and countless examples of it out our way. I could go through a list. I feel bad. I've named a couple. I'm not going to name them all, but there's a corner there that I won't feel I was able to cut, and Brandon maybe can speak to this better because to an extent he did, right? So he's, one of the maybe racers I'm talking about if I'm going to be all fair here, right? I mean, when you jumped from juniors to big cars, when we talked about it, I mean, how quick was it before you started winning, and how big of a difference was that transitionally for you? Maybe and maybe not a difference.
Yeah. So for me, the transition was just exactly what Travis said. It was the speed, right? You have to understand. You have to go from doing 85 miles an hour to before we had our slower engine built for the dragster. My car would go 145, 146 miles an hour. At that point in time, I was not ready for that at 16. So we had a slower engine built for that. And then still we were going, like I was going 138, 137 miles an hour.
To qualify this is eighth mile too, right?
That's right. This is the eighth mile, right?
Yeah.
So like we're still getting it, right? We're still doing 170 when you go the full length of the track, right? When you go to the quarter mile. So Travis is absolutely right. Like that, the racer or the kid getting out of junior needs to be able to identify that as to what speed they can handle and are comfortable with, right? Because not everybody's just a superhero that can just jump in and then all of a sudden we're going and flying. Some kids can, right? And that's a fine thing, but you need that slow kind of transition. And then like in junior, that's what I did. As Travis said, like I started going 15 seconds, then it was like whatever, 12, 13, and then 10, 8, 7. So that was quick enough, right? Because you're flying in those things.
Yeah.
So, but I definitely did find the transition much easier once I was more comfortable with how fast I was going. A couple finals, whatever semifinal stuff in my first year. Won my first race the second year. That was at Andrew's race at the DSE race for the Frantic 16.
Found that out the other night. I had no idea, right? It's made me feel special that I was part of that now, right? Even though I wasn't part of that.
Absolutely. It all kind of comes full circle, right? Yeah. So that was after my second year in it, and we just ran local stuff. There wasn't the same, like the Super Tour didn't exist then. There was still the Bracket Bonanza, but there was not a very prestigious, big, there like the Show Me the Money Tour was, but you're traveling 14 hours to Wawa for that. So there wasn't really many series around other than just local ones when we were racing at Shannonville. So that's my experience starting out in Super Pro was similar to Travis. I just knew more comfortable stuff in the car, I guess when I first jumped in. But I think it all kind of comes around that somebody that's going to be a successful racer is going to be a successful racer, right? I feel like the three of us were all very competitive and really wanted it, right? Yeah. We didn't just want to drive the car and just have a good time. You wanted to win. So then that also separates the amount you're going to learn, the amount you're going to take in from being at the track, right? You're going to sit there and watch and pay attention to what your dad's doing or whoever's doing. You're not out just hanging out with friends or somebody else.
I think there's a big part to that, like getting into and or understanding like what it takes to run a big car, right? That and maybe that's the difficult part with some of the junior program because you see such a diversity. Like one of the things with juniors that I've noticed is that we're getting into that point where you're seeing families that are getting into drag racing in general that have no background in it at all. Like juniors really come in. Like Brandon's family and my family, we race. Brandon's a third generation racer. I'm second. I know you're second as well, Travis. But like we were all in racing, and we found that transition into the big cars through either juniors or going into the big car. But we had a first generation at least ahead of us. There's a lot of interest in junior. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, to learn from, right? Somebody else did the growing pains. Right?
Yes, something I'm seeing neat that I'm curious about how this unfolds, and maybe this goes into a promotion talk, like promoter's hat goes on a little bit, is we're starting to see first generation families in junior transitioning into big cars. And one of the things that is difficult to do is sometimes like I was able to go throw battery chargers on the car and watch them change stop numbers and figure out how to try to, go 998 at altitude, not 990, but you learned all the ins and outs of the car that others don't. And that are only in junior as they transition. But because the junior world is so like I won't say it's new, but it's not new. Like it's really not that old, and we haven't gone through enough generations. Like I'm 37, and I was in on the infants, like the ground level. I'm only just got a kid who's relatively close to junior. in age. So there's a lot of things I think with this category and how it's unfolded and how it's affecting racing that we're still learning, that I think is creating interesting dynamics, right? And how it's going to affect the long term for racing. So, we were lucky that we had racing families to kind of grow up and learn this stuff in. Others are figuring this all out as one big group, mom, dad, the kids, right? That will be interesting as we move forward to see how that does. Like, even some people I raced juniors with that never got into big cars, like for whatever reason, they have kids now. And I've had that conversation and seen them where they want to get their kid into junior drag racing because they remember it. They remember doing it and how much fun it was, right? It's a little bit like the hockey conversation of I played hockey when I was a kid. Maybe I didn't play when I was older, but I remember what it was like as a kid. So I want to have my kids to have that experience. And we're coming into that part of, I think, the time that this class has been around for, where that's created. And I'm curious to see how much of that happens, and maybe when it does mom or dad now get a big car? Like, maybe they never had that chance, but do they go out and get the 11-second car or the 10-second car to be able to everyone go to the track? Like, there's things taking place. I'm kind of want to earmark and watch, because I feel like there's a lot to still unfold and unpack about how juniors have affected bracket racing, drag racing in general. I mean, generationally, you look around, like there's world champions like Erica Enders, right? She's a junior drag racer. Sean Langdon raced juniors. The McGahey family, pro stock, right? Chris raced junior, and his son Mason raced junior. Like, I can't fathom that there's a second generation junior drag racer in a pro stock car contending for a world title. Like, they're all things that are all brand new to this, that I don't think we all have quite figured out, both from operators to series promoters to just general fans of it, that are interesting, right?
Well, and I agree with a lot of what Andrew's saying. And there's a couple points that I just wanted to make and one being, for the majority of these kids that we've seen out west come up, the adjustment period's different kind of for most of them, but I would say 90% of them are extremely competitive. If we look back on, Top Eliminator series last year, we had Pad win another one, but the other two, they're junior dragster, graduates. Chevy Reeves, which his parents own the track in Edmonton, and then Jenna Michaud, and she's a second generation racer. And then we've seen some like Dalen Miller, that they bought a car off of us, and he's always super competitive. And I'm going to name some names, and there'll be some that I miss out, so this is a disclaimer. I apologize. But McKenna Bold and there's Ryan O'Connor. Like, these are all names that people that are listening that race out west will understand. All of them have had an adjustment period. They've always been fairly great on the tree because the young eyes, and they're no stranger to the starting line. But I think part of it, might be the equipment and getting to know the speed and the things we've talked about. But another point that I wanted to bring up on what you just said, Andrew, is one issue that we've talked about recently that has come up with our mainstay, this Top Eliminator group, is it's a bump class, so it's 890 or quicker. And the entry fees are good. It's good money for what you're getting paid and everything like that. But now that the other classes have suffered a little bit around the West, especially at Edmonton, and I'm talking like the slower super pro cars, the bottom bulb cars. Until recently, like I'd say the past 5 years, we've started to get more 8th mile stuff going on, and more inclusive programs. And that's not a knock at Top Eliminator. It's just that jump to go from a junior dragster program for a family that doesn't have all of the knowledge or the resources or the experience of dealing with a 7-second quarter mile or 4-second 8th mile dragster or whatever it might be. It's I won't say it's hurt our sport, but I think we just need to re-educate some of these families out our way anyways, that hey, you don't have to go and get a name brand chassis dragster and put a Sunset 615 in it and spend all this money to go bracket racing. And that's this is might come across as a shameless plug as a promoter, but it's not. It's one of the reasons I wanted to start promoting races that didn't have a bump and that were 8th mile, that included the no box guys and kept them separate and merged it in, was to get more of an inclusive format going on for exactly what you are saying, Andrew, is, you know, these families that, you know, might not be able to step up into, you know, these fast cars and best of the best. They need to know that, hey, you can also just go get a, you know, a little pickup or a Camaro and, you know, put a 383 in it. And as long as, you know, you pay attention a little bit and ask the right questions, and everybody's willing to help you make that thing competitive. Right. And, you know, there's a family, John DeYoung, out of Abbotsford. His son is now racing in a big car. John and I are very close. He's had me come out to a couple of races to mentally help his son get his head wrapped around, because the other thing is John's got 3 cars. John's also only been racing for less than 10 years, you know, so he doesn't have a lot of experience. So Adam's a 2nd generation racer, but there's not a ton of experience in the generation before. And that's not knocking John in any way. It's just, you know, he was building businesses and living his life and then decided to get into racing. And he's great for the sport because he went all in on it, you know, and now his son's doing it. But, you know, you need to help people, I think, a little bit that might not, you know, they might be a 2nd generation racer, or, you know, their parents might have just got into it because of the juniors and then they bought big cars. But, you know, there's a little bit of help, I think, that needs to be done in telling these people that, hey, you don't have to have the fastest car out here, because at the end of the day, we are still bracket racing, right?
That's actually a very good point. It's something that we hadn't touched on in the pre-show, but that's something I thought about myself, because, you know, as you and I came up in the slow cars, I know Brandon jumped into a dragster, right? So I'm not going to point Brandon out to the corner here, but I guess I kind of am, but I don't mean to. But that was one of the things that, like, the conversations I've had with parents and some of the roadblocks was the junior kids. I mean, there's a lot of juniors who watch what's going on above them, right? Like you've all probably seen that sign that's on the internet about, you know, there's someone walking around here, a kid walking around here, you know, looking up to what you do, right? So, you know, represent them well. And that's the truth. And I've been lucky to have a lot of conversations with parents that, you know, say, like, yeah, my kid watches what you do. And I'm like, really? Like, sometimes I don't pay attention to what I do. That's why I get into these problems, and they're watching me. But that's a reality. And I think sometimes what happens, though, is they look at, you know, all these people running around in the fast dragster, like, you know, my nice Corvette, right? Like, we didn't start there. And that gets lost sometimes in that, you know, discussion, because not everyone knows your story and I say your story, like everyone's generic story, right? Some people do get to jump into really great equipment on day one. There's a lot of great drag racers in the US right now at 19 and 20s who've jumped into cars that I could only dream about owning and running, right? And that was their first car, and they're out there winning, you know, 6-figure races. But the reality is the bulk of it is that foot brake car, that no box car, the 11-second car, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That discussion, I don't think, happens enough. That, you know, one day maybe you get to jump into, like, when I jumped into my 1160 car, we had a national event winning 150 mile an hour super gas car sitting in the corner on jack stands. Why? Because, in all honesty, my old man was determined that wasn't the car I was going to jump into and learn in. And you know what? Was the right decision. You know, I learned how to run a car manually off the bottom bulb shifting. I say manually, but, like, you know, without all the gizmos and gadgets, and learned how to race before I jumped into the better stuff. And it served me better in the long run. And I know others have that same story, right? But, you know, flip side, there's also others who've done really good jumping into good equipment. But when you hit that obstacle of maybe you can't afford it, like, I always worry that becomes the stalling point for our sport a bit, when they were really successful in a really good junior and no one can get to that next point, because they're thinking, like, we got to have that sunset motored 2020 American, or, you know, like, car, and it's not. You don't, you know, and it can be worrisome, right?
Well, and I don't know what it's like for you guys out east, but on the west, like, you know, there's some really good guys, like Derek Shirkey owns Titanium and stuff. These are all lower mainland guys, same as John. But, like, he's trying to cultivate, he's trying to cultivate an environment where, he wants to buy a bunch of suits and different size helmets. And I helped him 2 months ago. I helped him buy 6 junior dragsters, and he's going to have them out at the track, and he's going to, he's going to have kids come in and try it. And like, he's a giver in the sport, right? No different than a lot of the guys that sponsor my events they'll help out those families that want to go do it and stuff like that. But, at the same time, I think that, just like you said, if we can manage expectations a little bit, and it's great to have those people that are willing to help people along. And I think there's a lot of them, no matter where it is in our community, all across North America. But yeah, if you look at it and just realize you don't have to keep up with the Joneses. If you spend the money in the right spots, and I think the three of us and everybody listening know the key things that you should spend your money on in a bracket program, you can be competitive.
Yeah.
Well, I love the points that are brought up, right? Travis, obviously, like the mentor program that you talked about earlier, and then that, the opportunity of giving kids a chance to try it. And like I said, manage your expectations. A great example of that, Max Gauthier, Dale Gauthier's son, he just got out of juniors, they didn't just go buy whatever car. He kind of raced the car with his dad for a couple years. Max just bought a Vega last year, whatever. He had bought a truck when he was 16, bought a Vega, got some help out, right? Family and everything like that. But 15, 20 grand for a race car, that's, as old as he is, for sure, like from when it was in its prime, let's say. But that's fine, man. You're going racing, right? And you can have just as much success doing that as you can in the other side, like jumping into an expensive dragster or a name brand fancy unit. So you definitely have to do that. So before we kind of wrap up all this, right, we're getting close to it. I had a quick point before we jump in. We got some great comments and questions. Great thing I wanted to add about how junior drag racing impacts the sport. I have the points up here for the Bracket Super Tour last year. Mm-hmm. Top 20 in Super Pro, 8 people have junior dragster experience in that top 20. And other than 2, which would be closer to Andrew's age, Derek and Troy, the rest are all younger than me. So there's 6 of us that are 25, 26 and younger that are all in the top 20 for the Super Tour. And then scroll down to the semi-pro points, similar average, then we've got 4 out of 10 in the top 10 in semi-pro. So both classes, right? And then whether there's difference in equipment, cost of equipment, whatever, it doesn't matter. Kids, younger people are getting into the sport and having success. So that's the point. Like, whatever you think about juniors, this, that, whatever, it keeps people in, gets them interested early. And obviously the proof is there, and I think all of us have examples and can share them all day long of this is, how this is beneficial to it. So to kind of transition now over to the questions that we have, great one Emily asked a while ago. Thoughts on putting your own kids, current or future, in the junior program? I guess I'll start it off because I don't have any kids, but I cannot imagine not having them in juniors, right? I started when I was 6. It was the best. I played baseball and hockey as well, but give up all that to go junior dragster racing. So, the floor is up to you two now.
I'll answer again, and then we'll get to the guy who actually has kids. And it's inevitable, I think, for me. Similar to what you guys have said and what we've shared. Like, I think it's very necessary. Racing's not going anywhere in my life if I have anything to say about it, just like the rest of us. But there is one other point that we talked about earlier. I think when it gets to a point, we keep everything separate out here as far as age goes, but there will be a point sooner than being aged out that, my future son or daughter, they'll jump out of the junior and they'll be my crew chief and dialing my delay box in and learning how to charger. And there's going to be, in my mind, a year spent doing that. And I've suggested that to a couple of my friends that are having kids that are aging out, or they've been doing the junior street thing, which I know we really didn't touch on, but I just kind of said, like, hey, those were the most beneficial years for me as far as knowing how a delay box works and the routine for the burnout and the button as opposed to everything. Because I think quite a few kids get to that point where, they're maybe not so into it anymore. And so for me, my future kids definitely, they'll be in juniors, but there'll be probably a year spent where they're going to kind of learn how to get into the big car rather than just going straight from the junior to the big car.
So Andrew, before you answer, hold on. I'm just going to lay it out here for it because it was already put in the comments. Question is, will Charlotte be in juniors? It's out there. It's
so if my feed cuts or something comes through the door, being my wife to stop this answer, just throwing it out there so everyone knows what happens when the feed just goes blank.
Yeah.
We talked about this. Our daughter she's 4 actually at the end of this week. So I'm, I guess, 2 years away from potentially putting her into a car. The conversation we had was, and maybe similar to Travis's thoughts on this, but a little bit on the opposite spectrum. I would rather wait until I feel like she's interested in doing it. Like, to know for sure that this is what we're going to do, right? I don't know if I'm going to go out and buy a car when she's 6. Now, with that said, my original junior dragster is 2 lines over from my house and has moved back into the area. So I have a junior, I guess is what I'm trying to say, from 1994. But I would put her into juniors if she showed enough interest. If we were there and we knew what, that she wanted to do that and we wanted to get in on that. The reason I'm hesitant on it is simply because there is a lot of cost in that. I think that's a real thing. I kind of didn't want to go down this road a touch, but like every sport has cost. Junior stuff scares me just a touch because like everything else in racing, you spend 10, you're only going to get 8 from it. But I would like to see her get into it. I think it's something I really enjoyed as a kid that shaped a lot of who I am as an adult, not as a racer, but as an adult. And there's a lot of sports that people in hockey would say the same thing and things like that. So don't get me wrong. It's not just a drag racing, but I learned a lot as a person in racing. At that said, if she was 11 before she cared about going into racing, fine by me. But when she's 16, I'm going to have the best pit crew ever because she's going to have to figure out how to get her car dealt with and all my junk when I'm not in the mood to deal with it as well. So there's a mix there that between Travis's answer and me possibly being in trouble here any moment that, yes, I would get her into racing and I would enjoy it if she did. I think that would be a lot of fun and she would learn a lot. Do you have any other questions that could potentially have me on the couch tonight? Or
I'm sure I can probably find some if I look hard enough. We'll pretty much roll it up with that. Bill Thompson has a great comment. Nice, Bill, that you get to see it live. I know you always come on and you get to comment. Normally it's just later on. So Bill, it's nice to see you. Johanna asked to race. I know she raced at Shannonville for a long time, learning, right? And then that was a great experience. Lots more comments about it. The junior street program was brought up earlier. Great program. We're getting close to that hour time, so we're kind of rolling her up a little bit. But yeah, great conversation. Glad to have you guys on here for this. I think it went really well. I was very happy with it. How I will finish it is this is a good one. I got to add to the Andrew thing. I'm sorry. So Dave Stark, right?
Oh.
Andrew, apparently you've been doing all right. So, Grandpa Dave says that he'll get Charlotte Jr. So, so there we go. Yes, that's how we'll roll that up for tonight. Like I said, thank you, Travis, for taking the time to come on here. Andrew, as always, right? Nice to talk with you again. And
before you go, what are we talking about in 2 weeks?
That's a good question. Oh, yeah, that is a great one.
All right. I'm going to put Travis on the spot here then.
Yes.
Travis, what are you doing in 2 weeks? Are you available?
I'll be at the spring fling in 2 weeks.
Okay, so you're going to be live from the spring with us, you're saying?
Yeah, okay. Are we doing this Tuesday night? Yeah, well, hopefully I'm winning a Dragster Tuesday night because I could use that, but if not, I'm sure we could jump on.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've loved this topic. I've been looking forward to this topic. we brought this up a while ago amongst us, and we thought it would be fun. Sportsman, index, superstock racing versus bracket racing. The differences, the reason you like it more or less, basically just NHRA racing versus bracket racing, why you enjoy it, what's different about it. I've had some experience running limited, like local IHRA national events and divisionals. Done a lot of bracket racing. I know you've traveled, you've been in the divisional hunts, you've won a lot of big races on the tour, like, type of stuff I'd love to be able to do. You've done big money racing. Brandon's done a lot of big money bracket racing. Would love to get into it. I would love to get down and start talking about, honestly, we don't have to sit down and compare the two of them. I would love to just shoot stories about the differences between the two of them and just get into that, because I think there's a whole conversation there that's really fun. And if in 2 weeks you're not in the deep rounds for a dragster, then, and you got good Wi-Fi. I don't know what it's like in Vegas for internet and how that all works for you, but I feel like that would be a great discussion to have in 2 weeks.
If I can make it, I'd love to, because I think that's a great topic.
And if you're not, then we'll have you on the live stream watching as we do the broadcast then.
Oh,
no pressure.
Can we do a live show while watching a live stream? I don't know if I could pull that off.
I know people have done it. I know the Going Bracket Racing channel has done that. They'll do a watch party for it, and they'll watch it live. So if we can make that work, we'll have that conversation.
Okay, let's leave the subject loose. Either it's going to be Brandon, Travis, and Andrew talking about any sportsman racing and bracket racing, or it's Andrew and Brandon commenting on Travis racing live in Vegas.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know which one I'm more nervous for, but
yeah. No, that'll be good. So that's 2 weeks. So we're good for now. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, Ogilvy's Auto and Fleet Service, presenting tonight's show. Like I said earlier, contact me. You got any questions about prices, products, availability, whatever you need. Just shoot me over a message. We'll be talking to you guys. Make sure, follow the Bracket Life brand on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Bracket Life Bulletin. Got to remember all of them, right? There's a lot. Subscribe to the Bulletin. Send you all the emails when we're going live next. Updates on what we are going to talk about, and updates on how if it's going to be talking about Travis or talking with Travis. So thank you guys very much. Thank you for all the comments. It's always great to have everybody involved. We will be talking to you in 2 weeks. Have a good one.
What we got now is 4 super pro dragsters doing well. We're on our best season ever. Ashley's leading the points. We're all in the top 10. We got a couple races left this summer, so I'm really excited about the future.